And as you probably noticed, we have two sites for the conference. One is the Moodle site, the other one is run via Google Sites. I'm not going to get into the details why there are two, but they have exactly the same content, and both of the sites will be live following this event. So obviously, if you want to consult the information there, also to refer anyone to the conference, please do feel free to do so. Okay, now I would like to just welcome from the bottom of my heart, in a very personal way, all of our panelists. So hello, thank you so very much for all your hard work up to this point, obviously committing to the event in the situation where it's very difficult, I think, to commit to new things and kind of focus maybe on new projects, which we were asked you to do. Also for doing all the work, because you pre-recorded your presentations, you sent it to us. Obviously, you worked with the presentations of your colleagues, so thank you. We are most grateful. I would like now to give voice over to you. If you would be so kind to say your name, you just mention where you work and also where you are at the moment, so we have a kind of a sense who is where. So please, over to you. Thank you. Oh, Maria, do you want to start?
Yeah, me, Maria, right?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Maria.
Yeah, I was confused. Hi, my name is Maria Paz Peirano. I work at the Universidad de Chile. Obviously, I'm not at university now because we're still like in our homes. And I am trying to keep researching festivals from home. That's more or less the situation right now.
Thank you. Aida?
Hi, this is Aida Vallejo from University of the Basque Country in the north of Spain. So I've been researching mostly documentary film festivals, and my last project was the publication of 2 volumes on documentary film festivals with Palgrave.
Yeah. Welcome. Dina?
Hi, I'm Dina Jordanova. I'm at my home in Crail, which is a Scottish village on the seaside. At the moment, it's quite murky outside, though, but this is where I've been for a while now.
Okay, very warm welcome. And Antoine?
Hi, I'm Antoine Damien. I'm a postdoc fellow at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. And so I'm speaking from my apartment in Montreal.
Welcome. And Brendan?
Hi, everybody. This is Brendan Cradell. I'm coming to you from just outside Detroit, Michigan, USA, Motor City. I teach at Oakland University here in Michigan, but I haven't been there in quite some time.
Welcome. And Jeff?
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I joined a bit late because this is the first time I've ever used Teams, so I'm not even familiar with this interface. Based in Toronto. If you hear construction outside, it's the new condos going in all around me. So it sounds like the soundtrack from Chernobyl. It's very long and there's constant grinding of concrete and metal being riveted and so on. So I'm sure you'll hear a bit of that as the day progresses. So yes, I'm based at Ryerson now, teaching in media. So yes, glad to be here. If my microphone is all crazy and my voice is nuts, tell me, because all of this equipment is new, so it's a lot of juggling going on at the moment. So
well, you sound beautiful, you look great. It's fine. I sent you a personal message if there are any problems, but thank you. So everyone, thank you very much. I'm sure that it's very useful for everyone listening and tuning in to just put a name to the face and just make it all kind of more alive. The next kind of thing that I would like to ask you to, if you could take turns and just speak in few words, just briefly, about the main points from the presentation that you pre-recorded. That's for the benefit of everyone else who might not have the chance to see the pre-recorded content or joined in late. So if you don't mind, I'll just call you by name. And I'll start with asking Dina to be the first one. Thank you, Dina.
Yes, thank you, Dorota. And of course, I failed to say a great thank you for both of you to putting the effort to reorganize this, because I know everything was absolutely ready and set to go back in March. And I believe the conference was supposed to be on Wednesday, and it was Saturday or Sunday that we called it a quits, and kind of like, it was very dramatic. So now reconvening, even in these inferior conditions, I would call Teams, is not exactly my favorite place to be. But let's say kind of like, it's fantastic, and really I totally appreciate your effort. So thank you very much for putting up with everybody. I said I was feeling particularly awkward because I didn't know exactly, kind of like, in old age, we don't know how to handle technology. So I did record something that it was not really up to my aesthetic standards. And it talks about what I would have been talking about if I were coming to give a live presentation, and namely that I'm mainly interested in various approaches which are historical in general, but I believe that the historians limit themselves with their excessive devotion to archival material. So listening to Antoine's presentation, for example, I could relate because, of course, many of the phenomena that we are studying, they're simply not they're not simply not archived properly. So we don't have access to anything that is orderly. We don't have access to anything that is neatly presented. If we wanted to use such archives, we would do one more study on Hollywood, of which there are thousands of things. So we are obviously the people who want to study other things, to browse through old papers, to fight with catalogs that are soaked with water and kind of like, that people want to dispose of and so on. So thinking of some other studies I have done over the years, also specifically one on restoring the legacy of Indian cinema, which was hugely popular around the world without leaving any record really of its popularity. I have been thinking of methods which are very important in regard to restore forgotten historical setups where we are not, we cannot be bound only by archival availability, and where we have to enrich the archival methods by what I call using a wider set of approaches, which usually go in history under the term new historicism, which means admitting, like, a number of other variations where we need to scrutinize the moves of individual people. We need to look at a conglomerate of festivals that are around the festival that we are exploring. We have to make more use of personal testimony, of anecdotes if necessary. Clearly, like, if we can still interview people who are disappearing at some absolutely incredible speed, we can still have to go and, like, embrace them and talk to them as much as possible. And I managed to listen to the second set of presentations, because unfortunately today I have to leave at an hour from the beginning as I have another conference. But I listened the presentations to the second panel. And by the way, the format for now is perfectly satisfactory with these short presentations which are made. So I have to give you special compliments, especially I'm comparing with the other conference, which is at Yale University. I'm attending in an hour and a half. This one is by far more superior in format. So everybody is struggling with formats at the moment, like the festivals do. This one is so far one of the neatest and kind of like, really best organized that I have exposure. And I have another one next week. So I'm comparing 3 conferences. To come back to what I want to say, so this is what I'm talking about. In my presentation, panelists from the second panel, specifically Kathy Kamleitner and Estrella, I believe, and like, another one I can't remember at the moment who was there, but everybody who engages in historical research in their festivals, like I saw direct linkages between what I was trying to say and what they are saying, and I hope people understand what I have in mind. If there is a second round and opportunity to talk, I must say that I have prepared one slide which I'd like to show to elaborate on one concept which I have tried to introduce, which I call salt traders, the importance of individual people who are very active on the festival circuit that are not necessarily affiliated with any festival, because like we have plenty of material linked to the people who are in official position as programmers, directors, board members, so they do have some certain affiliation. But everybody who works on the festival circuit, we know that there are plenty of these absolutely free-floating individuals that actually all they do is to attend. They don't have a film to present, they are not publicists, they may not have access to any very important media outlet to influence the fate of a festival or something like this. Yet these are the people that are absolutely indispensable to the circuit. And of course, they carve their niche presence, and they are the people who participate in this dialogue. Were you at Festival A? No, but I will see you at Festival C, and now we don't have time, but we are at Festival B, and kind of very quickly we have to because we have no time because we are so rushed to go to the next festival on the circuit. So like I'm mocking this kind of people, but there are very many of these that don't necessarily have an official role, and this is why they have fallen through the cracks of historical record. Yet I believe they have a very important role to play. So if we come back to me, I'll give you an example. If there is no time, hopefully I'll have the time to write about it someday. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, I'm sure there'll be opportunities to just talk some more about this during the more general discussion. Thank you very much, Dina. So maybe I'll ask Antoine Damien just to explain a little bit about his research, because I think it chimes well with Dina's kind of opening remarks. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this conference, by the way. I really love the format. So my presentation was basically the beginning of my book, so I have to plug it. Get to celebrate it. LGBTQ Film Festival, Curating Queerness with Amsterdam University Press. And so what happened was I was starting to write a book about queer film festival, and I went to the archive. And trying to do archival research, I found out a lot of tiny film festivals which may or may not have happened, but which are not written about. And so I became really interested in that notions of festivals that we don't write about and why. And so I'm using these tiny film festivals and archival research in particular in order to think about what festival studies is doing about our method and why it is that we are focusing on particular types of festivals and what it says about academia and about the organization and practice of knowledge in general.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maria Paz, would you like to continue? Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you. Sorry, someone. In my presentation, I don't know if I made so much clear like what I've been doing, so I will do it now. So I've been researching Chilean film festivals. So I'm kind of constructing the landscape of Chilean film festivals, and I'm interested in looking into like how now and historically film festivals have had an impact in building this idea of film culture, and they're like have an impact in constructing the Chilean field of film and for that I've been doing a lot of things, but I concentrate now in ethnography. Because I usually use ethnography always in contrasting ethnography with another sets of data. So, for example, to understand more historically the festivals and their impact on the organization of the festivals, I use more archival research and ethnographic data, which mean ethnographic in the sense of being immersed in the festival, doing participant observation and in-depth interviews in festivals, which is also something that in the other panel, where like the next panel, some of the presenters are going to talk about also, so we can engage afterwards with that also. Mm-hmm. So I was talking about like how I did ethnography, what does it mean, how allows you to understand how the festival works and what happened in the festival, besides what the festival says it happened in the festival, which had happened a lot, that is not necessarily correspondent. So discourse and practice. And also I said at the end that I was working lately, more recently with festival audiences, and doing ethnography among festival audiences means that we kind of leave the festival with them and try to experience the festival from the point of view of the audience. And like some of the challenges that faces is that like basically these days, where is the audience? Like today, in the context of COVID-19, like we don't really do that. We cannot be in the festival with them in the context of the Chilean festivals, which are all online. So what questions that poses to our research from an ethnographic point of view. Where is the audience? Where are the interactions between the festival and the audience, and how we can locate them online, and what type of new questions that brings to the table, because there has always been an online dimension of festival, but now I think is going to be more online than before, and what are we going to do with that? That's kind of the main general idea.
Thank you. I just would like to maybe come back briefly to Dina, because we can all see now the slide about sole traders, because you've just shared it, Dina. So
I just wanted to make sure I have it. So do you want me to talk a little about this?
Maybe during the the sort of general discussion.
Yes,
because I would like
whatever you like. Just I will be leaving at 3 p.m. Just
Okay.
keep this in mind. Yes.
That's fine. Thank you very much. So maybe if you could stop sharing the screen, then the
Sorry.
participants will be able to come back.
Okay, sorry.
That's fine. Thank you very much. No, that's great. Thanks. So Aida, would you be able? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everybody. And also, I forgot to thank the organizers, and the conference looks really great. So thanks for the organization. So, well, briefly, what I talk about in my presentation is the problem of data collection. And I focus on different methods I work on when I'm doing field work. So I combine ethnographic methods, like Maria said, and it's true that in ethnography sometimes we have this reluctance from other social sciences to trust this methodology, because there is a lot of serendipity in it. So we collect a lot of different materials, and we let the natural flow of information as it happens in a festival. And we follow it. For example, you meet some person, that person gives you some information, you go to another, and so on. So this on the one hand. On the other, I also research with other kind of sources, including programs, the films themselves, archival material, and so on. So my main concern and my main point in my presentation is, okay, how do we collect all these materials during the research field, but also what we do with them afterwards, because not all of them are used in a particular book or text. So I developed databases, and I've been for many years collecting so many materials that I have there, and I'm collecting, this Diogenes syndrome. So I think I have that in research terms. So you collect and you make videos, and now with new technologies, you record everything. And I have all those materials. So my main concern was, okay, technically, these databases, how we develop them, and also in collaboration with IT developers. And on the other hand, the data itself, what do we do with that, or how other studies or our own studies can develop further or use those data, and how can we store it and put it in order, let's say. So that's my main concern.
Thank you very much. And Jer?
Okay. Well, I designed my talk more or less as a short series of observations, right? It's a little bit of an intervention, and it's at a meta level. So I'm trying to rethink, and of course, I don't consider this a hugely radical step at all. I think it's just a question of reflecting back and rethinking some of the words we're using and some of the concepts, and of course, the approaches that are part of that. So, I have training in Gadamer, Birmingham School, all these debates of the past. So it's this is basically a reiteration of that for festival studies. I don't even use the phrase festival studies myself, but a way of rethinking what we're doing and trying to make sure that we're not narrowing things prematurely, right? Or ever. So keep opening up the so-called field so that people can engage it in interesting new ways and don't feel confined. So I might not be speaking as much to the committed social scientists, because they have very specific fields and they're very, very, very committed to a way. This is much more common to humanities scholars who are used to bricolage is part of the everyday for humanities scholars. So you're always combining things in ways. They might use different terminology, because again, I'm hesitant to even use the word bricolage because it's already loaded with many reinterpretations along the way. So so that's basically it. So thinking of the area, how we're approaching it, and trying to keep it from becoming too narrow. And because at the very beginning, because I start with this anecdote from my own research, it was pretty lonely back then. I was the, Scotty was the other. There was only very few people dealing with, social movements and these totally different cultures outside of, Cannes and Rotterdam and all these others, which are, A-list festivals. They're wonderful, but from the beginning, I've been trying to open up the area and make sure that we're not all falling into the same, so-called circuit. We're not falling into the, there's much more out there. So I'll just leave it at that and we can discuss. Thanks.
Thank you. And
just 1 second, I go to plug in my computer, so I'm not leaving. I'll be back in a second. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, and Brendan?
I'll take that as a polite way of her saying that she doesn't actually want to hear whatever it is that I'm about to say. Well, firstly, to echo what everybody else has been saying, to Tamara and to Dorota, thank you very much for organizing this. And personally, thank you for re-extending the invitation to participate. Oh, somebody wants our attention. Yeah, I wasn't going to be able to be in London in March, and I was really sad to miss this. And so it resonates with me, Dorota, what you said earlier, that, in the midst of all of this adversity, there are sort of moments of gratitude that we find, I think, the opportunity to have something like this. So I really appreciate that. And also, I think that's partly the genesis of this talk that I've given, because maybe, and I don't know to what extent this is true of the other panelists here, but all of this is post-COVID for me, right? The invitation came post-COVID. And so there was no way for me to think about film festivals but through the lens of COVID when I was writing this. And what I was struck by as I was trying to think was just how little confidence I had in the frames and the methods that I already felt quite comfortable with for thinking through film festivals. As I say in the paper, I feel like our methods need to meet our moment, and I'm not quite sure where they need to go to do that. So for me, that meant in this talk trying to find historical analogies to contextualize the moment that we might be in. And I realized there's a very sort of low confidence interval here when trying to do so. And I'm inviting the opportunity to perhaps get lots of egg on my face this time next year. I'm more optimistic, actually, after listening to my fellow panelists' presentations, and Maria's in particular. But for me, I was looking to the challenge that newspapers found themselves in the 1990s with the advent of digital technologies and the web, and the crisis that precipitated in newspapers, but also the opportunity that it presented to a small handful of newspapers who are able to capitalize on this moment of crisis to dramatically increase their power over a system. And the rest of the presentation is thinking through what that might mean for film festivals, a system that's already quite top heavy. And I think in this way it resonates with what Antoine was talking about, these festivals that are sort of hard to find through the methods that we have. But I do very much worry that to the extent that festivals need to now also become multimedia companies and have massive IT departments just in order to continue their operations, we're looking at what Emily Bell talks of as a winners-take-all ecosystem that is inevitably going to just boost the voices of a privileged few and hollow out the mid-sized film festival, which deeply concerns me. So I'd love to talk more about that and glad to see all your faces.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. So maybe just taking the cue from Brendan's presentation, what I would like us to do now kind of collectively and for you individually is to take the temperature of the field of film festival studies. So given the moment that we are at the moment, what does it mean for you to conduct your film festival related research today? How can you continue your film festival research under the current constraints? Or maybe you're not constrained at all, maybe to the contrary, there are completely new opportunities that appeared. So what I would like you to do is just to think about kind of pros and cons of this new research landscape that we find ourselves in relation to film festivals. So obviously that's a lot. I don't know, and now I'm going to immediately ask you to respond. So just give you a moment to maybe to reflect, and if you are ready, please just start. Dina?
I am ready because I'm not going to say much. I said also in my presentation, I don't like this discussion to be hijacked by COVID matters. If it's really important, we will know a year from now. If it's not important, a year from now we'll have forgotten about this. I don't really see any point wasting too much time discussing this. I don't believe it's a hiccup. I think it will be with us for to stay. And like others who I see already making statements in the field, I don't believe the big festivals will survive unscathed. I believe the big festivals will be actually among the most serious victims. I also have my prognosis. I have agreed to contribute to collections because people, of course, are putting already collections forthcoming, which again, I also am not a fan of this rapid fire type of scholarship because there are more important things to life, maybe speaking from the position of the years. Sorry, Berta, I forgot what is your question. And I think I said enough to kind of like, say where I stand. Things listening to Brendan's presentation, and I absolutely take what Brendan is bringing on board now. Of course, for you, this is post-COVID because now you are with us due to cyberspace, as it moved in cyberspace. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. It would be too complicated to bring you to London. Things which you're talking about in newspapers, I totally relate. I have written about these things back in 2013. Where we said that, like, I have published a book, Digital Disruption, for example, where we talk about all these industries. We didn't expect that it will come to film festivals, but Marijke de Valk back then contributed to this book an essay which was already about the limitations and possibilities of film festivals. Yes, personally, my calendar told me this morning that today I am in Seoul at the Women's Film Festival in Seoul. Next week, it will tell me that I'm at the Pingyao Film Festival. And because what I have entered in my festival are the invitations which I had lined up for this fantastic fall that I have just retired and I'm free to go wherever I want rather than having to teach online and be busy and so on. But obviously it's not happening, and especially Asia is completely inaccessible physically at the moment. I think it's going to be much easier to conduct interviews. There are plenty of discussions online. I'm watching the screen talks, plenty of, there is much more than anything I would have ever wanted, but it is so sterile and I so much do not enjoy it really, that if it continues like this, I think I'll move just to another area to study or just stick to historical research. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose that I should maybe qualify my question a little bit. When I said today, it's up to you how you interpret it today. It may be today as a kind of a landmark, a certain point in the study of film festivals. It doesn't necessarily have to be conditioned by COVID-19. I mean, and I recognize that not everything that we do is in relation to that, because obviously people work on a variety of projects with variety of methodologies. So I wouldn't like my question to be taken as the one about, well, let's talk about film festivals in the COVID-19 environment, unless you feel that this is what you want to talk about, because that question is to you. So please, Maria, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you so much. I realized that I haven't taken the two opportunities before to thank everyone for the invitation and being here, so I'm going to take it now. As Brendan, I couldn't go to the original live event, so I'm kind of grateful also that it's now online, because I can go there imaginary from the other side of the world. And I think that kind of force the conversation to talk maybe not about COVID in itself, but also that the virtualization of film festivals, of what's going on in the festivals online, which because I was researching more ethnographically and from the archives, I didn't pay so much attention. I pay attention in the sense of that I was researching websites, and I kept, and it's in an article I have in a journal issue that actually Dorota edited just now, that like one of the impressions I had in that research is that the website of the festivals were always out to date, that it was super difficult to find the archives and history of the festivals. The festivals didn't have the history in the websites. And it was really difficult to work with like this mapping of the festivals and having the big view of the whole country, like when you can actually go to the little archives that every festival have in different parts of the country. So that was a main challenge, always have been a main challenge. And what have happened lately is that some festivals are kind of more self-conscious of their being online, and the websites are having more information. They are digitalizing more of the materials and the catalogs, and other websites are like kind of gathering them in their sites, as like we have a Chilean encyclopedia of Chilean cinema, Cine Chile, which is an online that you can gather, like for example, what films have been in the festivals lately. So there has kind of been a movement to put archives online, which is one thing. Have like kind of make easier to work on that aspects. And the other aspect, as I mentioned, is like the idea that like kind of, well, if we cannot go to the festivals, we have to see the events online. So I have been in a lot of like master classes and like kind of opening night of festivals that are being transmitted through Facebook Live, through Instagram, etc., things like that. So I have the opportunity here to talk about a bit like what Brendan was saying, like when he was saying, okay, this is going to be a game changer for festivals, probably big festivals maybe are surviving. We don't know. It's kind of like this kind of like a speculation of what's going to happen. And in the Chilean case, I'm not really sure, of course, what is going to happen. But it's interesting because on the one hand, it's a problem because there's no like the live event is not there. So probably they're going to lose a lot of their funding. I have to make this clarification, like 95% of Chilean film festivals have government funds or like kind of and they are for free, so they don't depend of like the audiences paying tickets. They're always for free. So imagine if people didn't go to the festival then when they were for free live. Imagine how many are going to go to the festivals if they are for free and they try to, for example, charge for like the viewings online. So there has been a lot of discussion on that aspect. And one interesting thing is that I think a lot of festivals, even with like the challenges they're facing right now, they're realizing that while being online, they have more opportunities to gather more viewers than when they were not online. So it could be a game changer in a bad sense, but also maybe in a good sense if they decide to go online. So now I am interested in seeing like all these kind of online events and the strategies festivals are changing to, especially to relate with the audiences, that I think it's going to be changing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I know, Antoine, would you like to go next?
Sure. So in terms of the research I'm doing, it's quite depressing, I'm not gonna lie, just because I can't go to the archive and do the research I was supposed to do as part of my postdoc. Being on the job market, it's a bit tough. But to speak more generally about festival studies, I think, there is a couple of questions we need to ask. One is about the long term of history, which Dina was talking about. Is COVID gonna change anything? It's tough to know for now. We can only be on a speculative mode. But that being said, I think it's coming at a time in which festival studies is basically 10, 15 years now. And it's a good time to ask questions about the assumptions we've been making in the field, which I'm really interested in terms of my larger scholarships, and to think about which theoretical framework we've been pushing, how are they questioned by COVID, how is our notion of a film festival really based on particular assumption that COVID may or may not call into question. So I'm really interested in asking that larger question, and I think it's a good time for that.
Well, can you just maybe elaborate a little bit what this kind of new larger questions might be?
Well, we tend to think about film festivals as terms of institutions that stay and are renewed each year. And I think it's a good time to ask question about this exceptional status of film festival, how it's historically situated, but also how some film festivals are not exceptional and are only happening a couple of times, and trying to use that crisis to bring forth different theoretical frameworks and notions and try to do festival studies differently, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Aida, would you like to go next?
Yes. Well, I did want to mention like academic research on film festivals, like in the long term. When you asked about that, I was thinking about this first step of cartographing events. I think that the first step we thought we were kind of finishing to some point, because most of our publications also included a lot of tables with the whole list of as many festivals specialized on something like our own documentary, or festivals from a particular region and so on. So this necessary first step to really delineate our object of study, I think this was a phase maybe which was about to finish, but I also want to relate it to two publications I'm co-editing with Maria Paz Peirano, in which we are focusing on Latin American film festival studies on Latin American festivals, to be accurate, and to other about social context, but in which we are also particularly interested in new studies which focus on geographical places which have not been so much, to which we didn't pay so much attention. It's interesting that for us that can be academically not very fruitful, because also these other kind of journals which are trying to expand the kind of festivals, the kind of approaches, geographical approaches we use are not so well rated and so on. So it's, for us, it's also a challenge to really, if we defend a post-colonial approach and also these geolocated histories of cinema and amplifying this cartography of the festivals to those regions that still we don't know how many festivals there are. I think in that sense, some part of this first phase is not closed. So we are really trying to take it to other places. But on the other hand, for festivals in Europe, maybe, or for some specific specialized festival, this could be a closed chapter or something. We already have like the big, most important data. And from them, we can really get into deeper questions or analysis which are not so much the description, but more into specific aspects like ethnographic works, like Maria's work and so on. So like it's seen with or without COVID, in the long term, I was thinking about that, the cartography first step, and then going to another spaces. And well, also because of COVID, but also before, one of those conferences I was attending and which was canceled, which was also the case for most of you, was for media industries. And I was actually talking about relationship between VOD platforms and festivals. Even though the pandemics have not were not the reason why this relationship between festivals and VOD platforms were happening, because it was happening before. It is true that it has been increased exponentially. This relationship, which was supposed to be developed within 5 years or wherever, suddenly happened in a few months. And in this sense, I see a shift, like an acceleration of something which was already happening. And I think, me particularly, because I was already working on that, I'm particularly interested on this relationship of the distribution channels beyond the festival realm, particularly VOD, and also in relation to commercial theaters and the problem of distribution. That in that aspect, I think the impact will be really big of all the pandemics. Like this is the points I want to make.
Thank you. Maybe Brendan, maybe you would like to come in.
Yeah, I mean, what Ada's talking about are questions that preoccupy me very much as well too, and I especially take the point that in a lot of ways we didn't start the fire, as the man once said, but this is a sort of an accelerant rather, instead of an instigation of completely new phenomena. I guess to take one step back, I would say, in my own thinking about film festivals, what makes it such a fascinating area for me is the complexity of the field and the fact that so many of the actors within the field are working, perhaps not at cross purposes, but their agendas are departing from one another. And so in my own thinking about film festivals, I'm very much drawn to why the various stakeholders of festivals choose to take a stake. And it's clear in the case of filmmakers and of cinephiles, it's less clear why corporate donors or why, to Maria's point, governments would be interested in subsidizing the ongoing operations of film festivals. And so for me, in my own research, I spent some time thinking about that. And that's where, for me, COVID is such a potential crisis, because we're not just talking about a rush to develop a vaccine, but we're talking about a shock to a global economic order. And it is very difficult for me to believe that we're going to move back into a normal where governments are going to have the kinds of budget for culture that they did prior to this. And the thing is, there are dominoes that topple from there, right? Like I say in the talk that I gave, the city of Detroit and the state of Michigan have, I want to be nice to them, but they don't really have an interest in promoting the careers of filmmakers here in Michigan, or visitors to the state when they come. What they have an interest in is tourism. The fact, though, is that tourism and that boosting of the local economy also has ancillary benefits for film culture. And in every way, when we're looking at festivals, it's those kinds of disconnected benefits that I think probably for many of us draw us to this field, because it's so messy, it's so fascinating as scholars. What I think will happen now, and I think Ida's points right now really drive to this, is that we're seeing a sort of a disentangling of a lot of those things. And VOD was already pointing us in this direction, right? For the VOD platforms, having festivals as a place to launch films is still a useful thing, but it's not clear why you need more than one festival if you're a VOD platform, right? The days of going on a festival circuit don't seem to, for me, square with the motives of a Netflix or Amazon or something like that. So all of this is to say, the way that I knew to think about festivals when I started doing research on this, which was very much in what the tradition Dina was talking about in her talk, the sort of the case study focus on particular festivals, or even particular editions of festivals that we would say would be important to this history. That way of thinking, for me right now, needs to give way, if we're going to answer the kinds of questions that I'm talking about here, to rather a macro way of thinking about film festivals as a system. Like, why do we have 5,000 plus festivals here in America? Why do we have 300 festivals in America that are deemed to be important enough for filmmakers to go to? And how can we maintain that system of film festival as a whole?
Thank you. Jer?
Hello, it's safe now to use my mic. I just experienced a fire drill, or fire readiness drill, so that explains the announcements that were barking out earlier. So I missed a bit of the front of it, but yes, yeah, COVID. I mean, I don't think we're going to get away from it very quickly. And as Brendan very sagely predicts, I think, and others, Maria and those who are focusing on it right now, we all realize, I think very intuitively, that yes, we're experiencing a very significant event. And sometimes I like to say I'd rather not live through historic periods or historic events, because they're just annoying, right? Who wants to live through a historic period? Because it's perhaps too transformative, it's disruptive to our banal everyday lives and so on. So here we are. COVID is going to make a massive transformation, as it already has. And I was just asked to write something. I wrote a piece for a publication I don't even remember the name of, but concentrating on labor, for sort of labor issues and how it's displaced. You know, of course, everyone working at festivals who deals with the public is now, at many of these festivals unemployed, right? So they've been laid off, they've been furloughed, and so on. So that's, it relates also to tourism and to cities and how they fund, the reason why they fund their festivals as they're generating income for, people of their areas too. So there's that aspect, which is extremely important. And another one, environmental issues regarding streaming, which I know Laura Marks has been writing about recently, and I'll be making use of that because, this great new era, and everything's free and streaming and so on. It relies on an infrastructure that consumes energy basically at the same amount of the entire airline industry before COVID, not now. Airlines, I think it's surpassed the airline industry because that's almost bankrupt, and everybody's at home watching Netflix. So so the streaming issue is very important, and how we're consuming so much energy and so on. So this utter transformation of festivals, and hitherto, one of my projects before COVID was, ironically enough, about how online cultures were using spaces, physical spaces, in order to create communities in real place and time. So, and now all of those festivals are canceled, even though they're all YouTube based. So there are all these YouTubers who are making product for these festivals that happened in real spaces and locations. All that they had to be canceled because, one, it would call their bluff if they put them online because they're already online and so on. So there's contradiction. So, and as we've been discussing, festivals, especially the A-list and so on, have had their very timid experimentation with online streaming and so on. They'd give a few, I don't know, press conferences away maybe, and very, very limited amount of experimentation at that level. But now, whoa, it's the experimentation is deep, right? This is much deeper. So some are synchronous, some are asynchronous, some are VOD and so on. There are all these different ways of conceptualizing how to use streaming from a festival position. So there's going to be massive changes, and I think they're already here. So that's some of my interests I jotted down. So
thank you. Thank you. So I just have a little housekeeping note. Thank you for the members of the audience that joined recently. If you would be so kind as to turn off your camera, I would be great, because we are just reserving the screen to the panelists. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to pick up on the point that already Maria and Antoine Damian started making about the accessibility or not or inaccessibility of source materials for the study of film festivals, because we have quite obviously drastically different accounts. Maria told us there is more than ever before, whilst Antoine said it's depressingly little, and I can't go and do the research that I intended to do at this stage of my career. So I just wanted to if we could just sort of talk a little bit about the type of source material that becomes more accessible or less accessible for the film festival research as a result of the current situation, or maybe some other changes that are taking place. Because what I remember from the arguments being made by people who study film festivals in the last sort of 10-15 years was the question of access to stakeholders. That was always been seen as such an impediment. You can't do certain research because you can't get it, or the fact that archives are not there, they are incomplete or inaccessible, and so on. So these are kind of an ongoing themes in film festival research, and I wondered if the current, if the moment we are at now, 10 to 15 years into film festival research, might possibly modulate that point of view, and in fact, maybe we are thinking about film festival research resources in a different way. maybe that's kind of is a question. Maybe this is what we learned from the experience of the past. So over to you. I don't know who would like to start. I don't want to be a teacher saying it's your turn. So please raise your hand if you're ready to talk. And is there anyone?
I mean,
yeah, Antoine.
I think in terms of method, it really depends which type of method and arguments we're looking at. If we're doing history, it's of course far more complicated without access to archive, or at least without access to primary sources. That being said, if our goal is to do interviews or to virtually travel the festival circuit, of course, that rupturing of space through COVID and internet, the move towards internet, makes it more possible. That being said, I'm kind of afraid of the arguments we may be making now because of the question of historicity and how, there has been crisis. There has been a lot of festivals having to deal with crisis. We're just not that used to seeing it from the West. I'm thinking about Viviane Saglier writing a lot about Palestinian film festivals and what it is to organize a festival in a time of crisis. And I don't know how much of it is specific to COVID and how much we should put on COVID in general. But it's enabling us to ask new questions about asynchronicity, about a crisis that experienced differently at different times in different countries, and what it means for festival for sure.
Thank you. Maybe Maria, would you like to add something to what you said already?
With the access, there's like I don't know, you can see this is a whole parallel discussion in the chat also, so I will try to like link it also with that. I mean, first of all, well, in terms of archive, there's also someone mentioned it already, I think in the conversation in the chat, like that there's also all this kind of material coming from the online platforms. So all this you can gather from Facebook pages, from that it was always there before. And again, it's not COVID. It's, I think what Aida says, it's like COVID kind of accelerated things and and we are kind of forced to see things that before maybe we didn't want to pay so much attention to necessarily. So this is whole things of like gathering. You can gather all the interactions from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram. You can build a new archive, which is the digital archive, which is huge and is very difficult to, I think, to go through this. I think Estrella was making that point in the chat, like it's very difficult to grasp everything that's going on because it's too much. So there are kind of like softwares that allows you to do that. And in terms of like, for example, the access to the films, of course, this is one of the points that you can access films that you couldn't before, but like already people is saying like, well, but not in every country, not in every region, we have all this. I mean, it's not that like suddenly the geopolitical economy in the world changed before. It happened like, I think if you remember like the first month of COVID, everyone was being very generous and you can see everything for free, and then very quickly that stopped. So we have that thing, right, going on. And also in terms of the audiences, I think our problem also is related to the fact that we don't really know so much about online audiences, because we haven't really, I personally haven't paid attention so much to online audiences before, because I was focusing in a live event. So that's why I'm bringing up these questions of like, who is this audience? Is the same people that was watching the festival before that now is watching the festival? Is other people, maybe now audiences that didn't pay attention to the festival are coming together? And also, it will be the same people in the next edition of the festival. These audiences online are going to keep being online or not. And I think it's interesting to know that, of course, now everything can be online, but in the future, it will be probably, I guess, a mix of online and offline. So we will have to find a way to understand how those are related. So how much of the interaction is offline and how much is online, maybe in the same person. But the problem we face is that we cannot go to people's homes to see how they interact. So we can have, and coming back to Dorata's point, we can see the interaction in the website. So instead of just seeing the number of likes, You can see what did they say in the website and go deeper on that. And like probably that kind of like, oh, we can skip the problem of the numbers there and see the qualitative interaction. Another problem is like we still don't have access to the actual numbers of audiences the festivals have. And I'm coming to actually another point that people have been raising here in the chat, like beforehand, also we didn't have that data. And in my case, in the Chilean case, the number of people actually attending the festival is a kind of a mystery, because festivals keep it to themselves, or they use that number also to apply for funding. So usually the numbers are inflated, that people were suggesting there before COVID. Now we theoretically have more numbers. And everyone, I mean, not everyone, but some of them are kind of pointing it out, the fact that, wow, now we have like, much more views than before. But of course, there is the problem that people is mentioning there, that clicking doesn't mean that you stay to watch the whole thing. It's just a click. And we don't really have the data of how long did they stay, for example. I mean, sorry, I'm leaving it like basically like a lot of questions that arise. And I think one of the things is like I think we haven't learned yet, because we are learning with the festivals how is this going so abruptly online, and also people and audiences are also learning to watch and festivals and films, and going to festivals like this, because I guess all of us has been attending festivals in one form or another online, and it's very strange and it's very confusing sometimes how to link, where to link, and how to watch it. So that's why I put in the presentations how this festival, for example, kind of explain to the audiences how to do it, or like us now in Teams, like Teams, Zoom, we don't know. So, so I think one of the things is like we're all in this learning process, and I think we have to also learn how to study this learning process. And I will leave it like that. Sorry.
Thank you, Aida.
Yeah, just to add two examples that connected to what Maria was saying, because she was talking basically about audience research online. And on the one hand, we organized a summer course on film festivals, and we invited the director of San Sebastian Film Festival, also online, because he was in Venice at the moment, so he was on the screen. And he mentioned, because also the very big concern is connected to distribution, was that he was very angry about this whole collaboration with VOD platforms, because their historical collaboration is with distributors, like for commercial theaters. So they are really much struggling against this wave. Like I'm talking about the big festivals, about these waves taking VOD platform, taking the festivals to the VOD platforms. So he said, but you know what happens with the VOD platforms? Do you know what the average screening, like viewing time it is? It's from 3 to 8 minutes. And this is real data they have from the VOD platforms. And so there is some data, but of course, this kind of data won't be published by the festivals which went online, because of course it's one viewer, great, we have a big success. And on the other hand, also I'm not, I don't know much about the inner functioning of VOD platforms, also how they pay the fees to the distributors and so on. But also I don't think they will be willing to share this kind of data. But it's a reality, and the big problem is the matter of attention. In a film festival, audience give the film an opportunity, and online they don't. So it's a really completely different experience. So I just wanted to mention that because it came to my mind when Maria said that. And other thing I also was thinking about is, well, in my faculty also they make political science, and I know some researchers on political science. I know they work a lot with the analysis of social media, Twitter accounts, and so on. And they have this kind of software like NVivo and so on. So it's actually scary, because only with some keywords they can collect information of one person, for example, that they know he or she follows one particular politician, who, or for example, they are doing a research project for that political party, and they can have a full profile about this kind of people, usually like football, because they are also followers of this particular team. These people are also in this kind of cultural project. So you have a whole profile of all the other interests of those people. This is some research that maybe now we could do. And we said before, we don't have much information about the audience, but it doesn't mean we cannot collect it, because in other sciences they are already doing that because of obvious reasons. So I just thought of these two examples connected with what Maria said, because I think can give some ideas of what's going on.
Brendan?
Yeah, I'd make 2 points as I'm listening to what everybody's saying. It strikes me that one, a lesson that Antoine teaches us in his presentation about festivals who choose to be remembered and those who choose not to is as relevant today, or more relevant maybe even, than in the moment that you're talking about it, right? Because I think about all the work that goes into producing festivals now, and it lives in Slack instances, and it lives in Gmail inboxes, and it lives in ways that are documented, just like the chat of this panel is documented in some sense, but also, to a great extent, these are both ephemeral archives, but also ephemeral archives that exist in ways that we're not going to be able to access them, which is, of course, the most heartbreaking part of all sort of digital research, right? The awareness that what you need is out there, and yet because the person who has the login password can't get it anymore, or because the entity doesn't exist anymore, then this trove won't exist. Whereas, and I think, Antoine, this is to your great credit, you're finding these ephemera of festivals that we can't even be sure whether they happened, but we have a paper trail of their existence, and that in some meaningful way means that they did, even if the screenings never happened. And connected to that point to data, something that was just coming up in the chat, and which I was thinking about when I was watching Ada's presentation, is that the parallel to media industry studies research is very much real here, and I think we're getting closer and closer to it. When we talk about how we work with data in the realm of festivals, just as when we are doing it in terms of the media industries, we realize the data that we want also has exchange value to data brokers, and that exchange value is often what prevents us from being able to access it as scholars. That's the business model of the Marché and of Zenodo, right? Is to accumulate the data that we're talking about and to sell it to people. And because they have that, and because they sell that, it makes it difficult for us to get it. And the more that data is valuable, unfortunately, the harder it is for us to work with. And that is another one of the really frustrating things about digital research, right?
Thank you. Jer, is there anything you would like to add before we move to the next thing?
I think we can move on safely.
Okay, good. So I will thank you very much, everyone. I'll hand over now to my partner in crime, to Tamara, who I know has been, I'm sure has been following the chat and also has some other questions prepared to the panel. So over to you, Tamara. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So what's really wonderful about this conference so far, just some initial observations, is that all of you have had so many incredible ideas, and meanwhile we have the audience that is asking fantastic questions. And so I'm going to be really honest with you, we've had some wonderful questions asked prior in response to watching your presentations, and that is what I was going to go to next. But I would also ask for those of you panelists that are watching the chat, if you want to pull in some of the questions, and also Dorota is monitoring the chat, live chat as well, because ideally we want to interweave the earlier questions with these real-time questions. Also recall that in half an hour, we're going to take a break, we're going to end, and then we're going to start panel 2. And I'm hoping that some of these conversations will bleed into the second panel. And then again, a pitch for tomorrow, we're going to have practitioners and film programmers talk, and they'll also be engaging from maybe a different perspective on these kinds of questions. Maybe some of the empirical data questions about tracking, let's hear what they have to say. So this is going to be really, really interesting. But without further ado, what I'm going to do now is ask specific questions to specific panelists based on questions that were asked. But I'm going to also ask that this be a very collaborative situation where if other folks want to jump on in, let's do it. So let me begin with Antoine. There were some questions asked, such as Jonathan Ali actually asked about, Antoine, your research into queer film festivals that quote unquote didn't matter echo some of my own research and interest into forgotten Caribbean film festivals that have similar issues concerning archiving. How can this lost history be recovered? And I'll just also add, Maria Paz had a similar question about what are some research strategies we might think about and key concepts that we can use to study these festivals that quote unquote don't matter. And we might expand that to mean smaller cinemas, the overlooked, the marginal, looking at it post-colonially. So let's talk about quote unquote film festivals that don't matter, because clearly for us, they do matter. So how do we elevate them? How do we rescue them? How do we valorize them?
I mean, I love that question, especially because I think, for me, studying queer film festival is not about the queerness in itself. It is and it is not. It's really about having this form of identity film festival, which are typically marginalized in scholarship or thought as different, and using them to think about festivals in general and use that position of marginality as a position to create knowledge, rather than as a position to be in the margins only. In terms of what we can do, I think if queerness taught me anything, it's about utopian reimagining, and that's really Munoz. Jared talks a lot about it actually in his scholarship as well, but about using these tiny traces to think about what could have happened, to think about possibilities and potentialities in the past and in the present, and trying to bring these different politics, different formats to life, and to imagine what it could mean for nowadays, which is a really vague question, but I'm far more interested in the questions they are kind of asking us to ask than in the practical answer, because oftentimes the answer is actually limiting that.
Okay. Does anyone else want to add to this question of kind of thinking about these otherness and film festivals?
I know.
Okay, I had to mute myself because my coworker just came in saying that she didn't care about otherness and film festivals. So there you go. Okay, well, if anyone else want to say anything? Maybe Maria, since you work on Chilean film festivals. I mean, you are putting these festivals on the map. And hopefully when COVID is over, whenever that is, people will go to Chile. More people will go. They're already going, but more people will go. They'll know more.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. There is a difficult political context also at the moment. I'm not sure about that. But
okay. Fair enough.
but you're right. I made the questions also to Antoine, because I do agree with him that it doesn't actually have to do with only the topic or the type of festival. The thing that unite all these little festivals is that we're usually not in the map or of the big ones. That is also what Dina was saying in her talk, right? That we usually, still most of the scholarship is around those and about the circuit. And it's important. I think I think what I was thinking when I asked the question to Antoine was also why festivals matter and for who, and there are different ways festivals matter, and maybe we have developed more a discussion on why festivals matter for the industry and for international circulation and for filmmakers, but not necessarily for all the other things festivals. But I mean, we have been talking about it, but I think it's always good to have a bit more about that, and maybe more discuss some theoretical frameworks where we can think about those smaller or more marginal festivals.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Do you want to add something, Jer? Go ahead.
Sure. Well, it's a very exciting topic, of course. And I think I cover some of that in a chapter on ephemera, for example. So encountering limitations on the archive is something we do always. And some are extreme limitations, and that's interesting because it poses new questions on why. And I think Antoine, of course, gets into that, like what are the conditions for not archiving? And sometimes it's very practical. It's people are on the run. They're more interested in the future. They don't have a historicity in mind when they're creating something in order to document and so on. So it's creating history is not part of their issue. It's more about what's coming next. So we deal with these limitations on historical festivals. That again, how do we piece it together? And I think history writing, historiography is very interesting in that respect because, of course, the archives are limited. Maybe you can salvage some interviews with people, and that's interesting too, right? So you can kind of piece it together in a I don't want to use the word, but triangulation of some sort. Figure out what happened and get accounts, and also there's even fictional accounts, like projecting back and inventing something that could have happened, right? So this is also used in types of historiography that are, interesting, and I think might even be productive for these. I mean, I remember, thinking about a festival. I still don't know if it ever existed. I have partial evidence that it might have, and that's as far as I ever got. So, for me, it's interesting, and it could evolve into even a larger meditation on, of course, methods and limitations, but also imagining what that could have been. So that's my little intervention here.
Wonderful, Jer. Well, there's a really fruitful discussion on the chat, and I want to just kind of take some pieces from that. Estrella talks about de Valk's term adding value by perhaps thinking about curation as an activist intervention. I'm sort of creating a synthetic question out of all these really wonderful ideas. Are there other geographies that are in a way living this same condition of festivals that don't matter? The way in which I said to Maria, wouldn't it be amazing if we could all go to Chile? And then immediately I thought, well, Chile's really far away. My family's from Argentina. We would never visit it. It was too far away. It was too expensive. There are all these limitations, right? How do we rethink that? Scotty is asking questions about hierarchies. I really love Scotty's work on the archipelago of the film festival circuit. It's not really a true circuit in the way in which it's inclusive and expansive. Linda Dovey has a new chapter on the curatorial turn. So how are these ideas that are circulating, how will that help us look and help bolster these other cinemas that are supposedly not as important as A-list, to kind of echo Dina's point about moving away from the trinity of film festival research. So why don't let's talk about curation. Let's talk about activist interventions that we can make. Ideas, thoughts, responses to the questions? Go ahead, Brendan.
I'm not entirely sure if this is a response to your questions. I should preface what I'm about to say with that. I apologize.
That's okay.
But it stimulated this thought. So in that sense, it's, I suppose, in the most technical sense, a response. Yeah, I mean, lately I've been thinking a lot about independent cinema here in the United States. And I'm reading through the chat. I'm aware that a lot of what we're talking about here is an attempt to stop thinking about American cinema. And so I'm sensitive to that before I say what I'm about to say. But of course, the hegemony of Hollywood suppresses independent cinema in the United States just the way that it suppresses cinemas around the world as well. And the sort of guerrilla tactic of independent filmmakers in the US is this film festival circuit, which, to Scotty's point, is not, in large ways, not meaningfully integrated at all with any sort of broader sense of circuit. Like the American Film Festival movement doesn't really recognize the same kinds of logics that we're talking about when we're talking about the International Film Festival arena. And the big three, for instance, to take the point that was just made, is actually a completely different big three than it would be for filmmakers anywhere else in the world. And then therefore there's this whole sort of substrata of festivals that are the meat and potatoes of the working independent filmmaker in America, and all the value systems that go into ensuring that you can make a living, the grant writing that you're doing in order to continue to make your work. You need to be able to demonstrate that you're getting your work out to places, and the festival culture of America is the way to pad the CV, in a sense, in the same way that, you know, academics will respond to when thinking about journals. But all of that is largely invisible to the American media industries because it's dominated by, you know, a handful of multinational conglomerates that could care less about what's going on there. So, yeah, I'm not going to land this plane, I realize, but I realize instead that, like, I'm very sensitive to these questions, I guess, of what's about to happen with the further dominance of streamers and things like that. Because for me, what I most worry about is marginalized filmmakers in America depend on these places as outlets to get their films out, and I worry for the long-term viability of those outlets.
Well, why don't we take some cues from, you know, Maria, you said that Chileans are harnessing their power together in a kind of a form of jujitsu where we're going to resist the large entities. And, you know, Brendan, you were asking to know more about it. So why don't we, as much as we can be worried about consolidation as it already exists, let's face it, maybe we can learn from smaller festivals. How are they surviving, given the fact that these are in countries where they do rely on state support? And when the neoliberal model continues to pervade the landscape, they have to be very savvy and adapt and nimble. So can you speak to that, Maria? And then I think someone had their hand up. Maybe Jared, you want to go next after Maria?
Yeah. That's a very kind of new thing, actually, that a group of festivals have been working in a network of film festivals for the last 3 years or so. And this year they decided to make one single festival with all of them, which is a strange thing. I kind of still understand it so well, because like it's going to happen in a couple of weeks. But for example, festivals are at the same time having their own thing and having a part on this kind of group festival, right, of this network, which it was proposed to the government to have direct funding for to face the precarity of the situation after COVID-19 for cultural workers. Okay, so that's happening. I cannot still say what is going to happen with it because it happened yet. It's kind of moving. What I find interesting is the fact that they have been using the networking, the funding for networking to do that, and also I find it interesting in a way that kind of allows to overcome some of the like pressing issues on local festivals, which is always funding and getting it. One of the problems with that is that not all the festivals are in the network, and that the decision that given them money for that was very obscure in the way that we don't know how that happened. So I think, I speculate that I think it's also going to be problematical for like the relationship between the festivals, and also with the festivals and the other showcases like the art cinemas that are also online, that are also doing a network. And now we're facing, actually, as some people was pointing out in the chat, also new competitions in the way that how many screenings do you actually need and how it's so much offer online also that you turn out not watching anything or just one thing or something like that. So it's kind of on one hand interesting, and you see like, okay, they're kind of trying to do it together, but also it is always, I think, is going to could be conflictive and problematic with other platforms. So we will see. I will just put it as like a question again.
I think Dorota, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to just pull out just one comment from the chat. I mean, there's so many, it's such a rich conversation that obviously, you know, there's much more to talk about. But I noticed there is maybe a little bit of a disquiet going on there about whether film festival studies are now really focused on the big data studies as opposed to looking at curatorial and programming issues. And, you know, are we having some kind of a split? Are our agendas, you know, really shifting into a different direction? Obviously, it's about data that maybe we cannot access, but we are deeply aware that it's there and maybe we would like to have it. And is this where we are all going? Or clearly question coming from some people who are curators themselves and programmers, are deeply embedded in film festival cultures. They obviously maybe are less comfortable with the shift in terms of research. So I just wanted to put it on the table, just to say that, you know, there is a certain dynamic in the chat as well that responds to us. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jer.
Well, it's a justified response, I think, but I think it's also what we're living through right now. I think it's partially caused by our discussion of COVID so much and discussing online methodologies. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on the aspects that are very difficult to research. So I mean, programming, of course, we all take that into, I hope, take that into account, because programming is obviously very important. So and everything I've studied historically has been out of activist tradition. So it's like they are all born out of activism. So it's I am very attentive to that and all the contradictions that come with that, and the différents that come with these areas. So it's I think it's a good response to criticize maybe too much attention to audience analysis. But for us, if we're doing, if we're studying this area, we also care about the audience. So that's part of our issues here. So it's obviously a big enigma when we're dealing with online. But of course, the conversation we've been having has been very much focused on that kind of quantitative data. But I don't think we're avoiding programming. We can discuss it more perhaps as the questions arise. And yeah, that's enough for me.
Great. Aida.
There's a comment following on what Ger mentioned. I don't think it necessarily is incompatible, meaning that this, when, for example, in my presentation, I was talking about gathering all the data. I was including, I was going like taking every catalog of every year of each festival, like reading the title of the film, adding the synopsis and so on, in which section it is, and then you see trends and you see which films have been selected in which kind of festivals. And this is programming. I mean, I don't find it necessarily incompatible one with another, but it's true that today we were focusing maybe mostly on other issues, but it's some trend and some important element we take into account in other studies and in the publication of the people who are members of the panel. So I think we consider it important, of course.
Of course.
Well, I'm conscious that we only have one more minute, so I would love to start another discussion, but I also wonder if maybe we want to talk about takeaway. Well, it's 9:30 in my time. So Dorota, do you want to, how do you think we should end this amazing panel that I don't want to end? Because there's still many, many questions. What I will tell the panelists is that with the questions that were given to you via the chat, we will be cutting and pasting those questions that we weren't able to ask you, so that you are getting some actual directed feedback. And clearly you're getting a lot of feedback on the chat. So if you want to go ahead, even though we're recording this and you can go back to it, you can start cutting and pasting these questions if they're useful to you. That's what I'm going to do. And I would like to, as I said earlier, carry over some of these questions to our next panel. Do you want to say anything, Dorota?
Well, I think that it's just a very good plug-in. It's important to say that the record stays, and hopefully, it will be useful for individual research of people on the panel and also of our audience. I'm sure that this discussion will resonate with our following panels. So I hope that everyone will stay with us. We are going to reconvene with another wonderful group of panelists in half an hour of the UK time. So that's going to be 3 o'clock for me, PM in London. I do not know what time it's going to be for you where you are, but hopefully you'll stick with us. So please return, and it's going to be the same format, so you kind of, hopefully everyone is familiar with that, and we can move on. And I just would like to say a huge thank you to Maria, Aida, Antoine, Jer, and Brendan, and Dina as well for being here with us today and contributing so generously.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you all so much. And thank you to all the participants for being here and participating. This was incredible, but we will see you in 30 minutes and we'll continue the conversation.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much again. This was great.
Thank you. Bye.